The Sheila Zielinski Show, the only show to give you the truth behind the headlines, prophecy, and the deeper things of God. Now, here is your host, Sheila Zielinski.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the July 21st, 2016 edition of the Sheila Zielinski Show. I am very excited to bring on my guest today, and they really need no introduction. It is Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com and Timothy Alberino from the Alberino Analysis. Steve and Tim have done a collaboration putting together an incredible full-length feature film. It is part 2 of the True Legends series called The UnHoly See. And let me tell you, it is packed with explosive content. I've watched it, and I'm very excited to get into this today because let me tell you what, explosive is an understatement indeed. Steve Quayle, Timothy Alberino, welcome to the program, gentlemen. It is a pleasure to have you back on.
Thank you, Sheila. And it's exciting to be on with Tim. And you know how I like to go with the bottom line. Tim wrote this and directed it. I produced it. God brought it all together as the amazing conductor he was. We had so many, I would say, divine right-hand turns that the Lord provided us, not only the timing, but also the people at the exact moment. And what's fascinating, as you're probably watching as history just accelerates, is that the release of this corresponded obviously with Tom Horn's work, but also the announcement from the Vatican that identifies, in my opinion, this Pope as the false prophet that's been prophesied in the book of Revelation. So I'm going to turn over to Tim and just let him go, for it, and then we'll go back and forth. But I think it's important that people understand this is a message for right now, but everything in the past that has been done, that has been controlled in antiquity and history, has enabled becoming globalist world rulers, Satanists, to take control of the planet. So True Legends, the series, The UnHoly See, is just probably one of the most in-your-face, detailed explanations of what's going on, especially with Rome, how it fits into the end times, how it fits in with the alien deception. And as Tim and I are talking to you on the radio right now, I just got in another, Tim, a really amazing testimony of how these videos, Sheila, are putting things together for people, almost like the final pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. So, Tim, share what's on your heart, and we'll go as the Lord leads us.
Well, I always like to start off with explaining to people what the Holy See is, for those who don't know. The Holy See is the governmental entity, I guess you could say, of the Church of Rome. It is the governing power and has been since ancient times, and that is the official designation for the Church of Rome. We call our film The UnHoly See because of the activities that the church has historically been involved in, some of which we've uncovered in our film, and also because of what we're projecting into the future, what's coming in terms of a deception that we believe is going to revolve around an announcement that is going to come from the Pope of Rome in the future, an announcement involving disclosure, aliens. We believe that at some point in time in the future, the Vatican is going to produce documents and ancient manuscripts and artifacts that are going to support a claim that is going to have bearing on the gospel of Jesus Christ and on the biblical narrative of history in a deceptive way. And so, the timing for our film, as Steve was saying, couldn't be better because we're already seeing this deception begin to unfold as, in my opinion, the Church of Rome, and specifically the Vatican and the leadership of the Vatican, the Pope and the cardinals, are already beguiling Christian pastors all over the United States and all over the world for lack of a better term, getting into bed with them on certain levels. But what most people don't realize is the agenda behind that and the massive deception that's brewing on the horizon.
Well, and I really like what Steve said. He said the greatest cover-up in history is the cover-up of history. That is so stunning to think of that statement. You just alluded to this, Tim. The Vatican really does know all the secrets. So you kind of could say, Steve, all roads really do lead to Rome, don't they?
Right, and as I said in one of the statements, I think it was when I wrote that for Tom's introduction to his Blood on the Altar book, I said, and unfortunately for the Christians, that led to the Colosseum and obviously the slaughter of Christians. Here's the thing. What people have got to understand, Sheila, and this is my chief complaint with modern-day contemporary Christianity, it's just not only, there's so many, but this is the biggest one, that they've denied the Lord Jesus Christ, the very basis of their faith. It's Jesus' name in Christianity, Jesus Christ, and obviously Jesus is his name, Christ is his title. But the point is that in what we're doing with True Legends, a series, I believe the Lord is allowing us basically to unlock the different lies in history so that truth might come out. It's just like what I've said before. God is absolutely going to show the lies that people have believed and confront them with the truth, where they will either have to choose one way or the other. One of the things that's interesting about True Legends is that it leads to the headlines of today. The Nazis, even as we're talking, Tim and I are talking, Turkey is basically making the claim that Erdogan is the new caliph, or if you will, the leader of the Islamic world. We've got the all roads leading to Rome, and obviously anybody that knows the story of Istanbul and the Eastern Orthodox Church knows that we're now seeing a combination even where the churches are trying to come together. Well, this is critical because Bible-believing, Jesus-loving, following, biblically obeying Christians are going to be vilified to the point that we're going to be come under the most severe persecution in the history of the world. Now, that doesn't stand out to be most people's favorite subject. Now, how does this relate to True Legends? The Pope has said every single evil thing that he can say against Jesus, denying that Jesus is the only way to salvation, all of his anti-biblical statements, yet no one ever calls him on his pro-Islamic statements. What we found in True Legends is that there is such a control mechanism, and I'll ask Tim to address that. When we get into the interviews in the field, whether it's Sardinia, whether it's Malta, whether it's Rome, and God opened up some interviews in Rome that are just fascinating. Tim will deal with those. But everything and everyone, there's this unseen hand, this mysterious, if you will, death angel that they're scared of, they're terrified of. And guess what? It all goes back. And when we talk about the Vatican, we're not talking about the Catholic faith. We're talking about the control of those who use the Catholic faith and other faiths to basically hide the truth for their end-time agenda, which will provide the way for the annunciation and presentation of Lucifer, who became Satan when he rebelled against God, to come into the world and to take the place of Jesus Christ, and everybody will worship him. So, Tim, share about, if you would, lay it out kind of why the alien deception and why the cover-up, just make it bullet point, if you will, because we got, Sheila, we got like 300 hours to cover in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Well, we found out that when we started our documentary series, our True Legends documentary series, and we started to travel and go on these expeditions, we found out that in many cases when you go to these megalithic sites, when you visit these important ancient archaeological sites, you find the presence of the Catholic Church. And you find more than the presence of the Catholic Church, you find a cover-up by the Catholic Church with other institutions that are literally sitting on top of the evidence, pointing to a history that most people are not aware of. And we're talking about a history that deals with the world before the flood of Noah, the antediluvian world. And in order to understand the lie that's coming, we have to understand the pre-flood world, as in the days of Noah. And so we noticed that right away. And that was not our objective when we started this documentary series. We went out to study different things pertaining to giants and other ancient things, and that's what we discovered. And so that's how we realized that the term all roads lead to Rome is still relevant today. as it pertains to the cover-up of ancient history of the pre-flood world and to the deception that is brewing and that has been conspired in secret for many, many, many years, and it's about to be unleashed on the world. So in regards to megalithic sites, for those who don't know, megalith simply refers to constructions that are built with extremely large stones, and these constructions are most often Cyclopean architecture. Cyclopean architecture refers to architecture that uses megalithic stones, it holds them together without the use of mortar. Historians invented that term based on the Greeks, who believed that it was the Cyclops that built the great megalithic structures all over Greece. Basically, what that represents is it was the offspring of the gods, is what the Greeks were saying, that built the megaliths all over the world, and we concur with that. So when you deal with megaliths, when you deal with these ancient mysterious buildings and constructions, there are artifacts associated with these things. There are secrets. There is technology and knowledge associated with these things. They're not just amazing constructions. There's a whole series of things that are associated with it, mysterious things that certain institutions around the world love to get their hands on, especially the Church of Rome, as we've discovered. And most people are familiar with the fact that the Vatican, beneath the Vatican, there are catacombs and underground passages that were there before the Vatican was built and before St. Peter's Basilica was built. And again, most people are aware of those catacombs and of the archives, the famous archives that have even been featured in television programs. Although very few people have access to those archives, they're very well known. And in the archives, they have ancient manuscripts, many, many manuscripts, which have never been seen by the public, which, if they were to come to light, would in fact change the course of history, or would change the narrative of history as well. But they don't just have manuscripts. They don't just have an archive full of manuscripts. There's also something called the Vatican vaults. And in the Vatican vaults, there are artifacts. We believe the bones of giants are down there, but there are artifacts also hidden away that would definitely change the narrative of history and also the projection of history if they were to come to light. And when I say artifacts, I mean skeletons, I mean skulls, technological things from the past that would shed light on some of the mysteries of the past, such as the megaliths. And so this is the kind of information that we discover is being controlled. Now, why would you want to control the narrative of history? And as Steve already said, it is to control the future narrative, the narrative that is coming. So in order to control the projection of history, you control the narrative of the historical past. And especially if you're interested in a deception, in formulating a very specific lie, you have to make sure that those pieces of the puzzle that would expose that lie are hidden away, or at least under your control. And it's important to understand, too, that the Vatican, when we say Vatican, and when you think about St. Peter's Basilica and the seat of the Pope in Rome, you're dealing with a very, very complex organization that has many other offshoots involved in it, all the different holy orders and the different organizations within that make up the Vatican, that make up the Roman Catholic Church. And it's those governing powers that we're pointing to when we say the unholy see. We're not pointing at Catholics. We're not pointing at your average Catholic that goes to Mass. We're pointing at the power structure. We're pointing at the top of the pyramid that is involved at this point in Luciferian activities. So we were able to actually prove in our film, we present a couple of cases, one case in particular, that proves our statement, this amazing statement that we make, that the Vatican knows all the secrets and that the Vatican is controlling the narrative of history and has hidden artifacts. And it's a situation concerning what's called the Chincana. It's in Peru, in South America, in Peru, in Cusco, specifically in Cusco, Peru. And the Chincana is a legendary, it's an old legend, a very, very old legend. The word comes from the Quechuan language, which is a native language. It's the language that the Inca spoke and many of the other tribes that were native to the region of Peru. It literally means the place where one gets lost. And the Chincana, when you take the totality of the legend, it's far spread. This legend is all over South America under different names. But what it is it is a massive, a vast underground world that exists, especially under the Andes, but it runs all the way beneath the Amazon jungle. So you can go in the Amazon jungle and you can find native tribes in the jungle that will tell you about the Xincana and that will affirm this legend that you hear about in the mountains of Chile and Argentina and Peru and Bolivia. And I mean, it's everywhere. This vast underground world is comprised of both natural and artificial tunnels and caverns. In fact, there's even underground cities. And we were able to make contact with, to my knowledge, the only researcher and explorer who was able to scientifically prove that the Xincana exists. Because as it stands now, in historical terms and in archaeological terms, it is a legend. It does not really exist. But the fact is that it does exist. And what we found was that in Cusco, a church of the Dominicans, a Catholic church, is sitting right on top of one of the primary entrances in Cusco to the Xincana and has known about the existence and the reality of the Xincana for hundreds of years and has allowed this idea that it's a legend to persist, even though they had absolute proof and knew 100% that it was not a legend. And beneath the church of Santo Domingo, the convent of Santo Domingo in Cusco, which is the site of the Coricancha, which used to be the Incas' most important temple, which when the city of Cusco was sacked in the 16th century, the Spaniards turned it over to the Church of Rome, and it became the headquarters for the Dominican order, and the Dominicans were the primary proselytizing force in Peru to the natives. It wasn't a gentle preaching by these people. It was a very painful coercion, a very Inquisition-like situation happening there to convert the natives in Peru to Catholicism. So here we have, for hundreds and hundreds of years, in Peru, in Cusco, a Catholic church sitting on top of the entrance to one of the most amazing ancient wonders. I mean, this would definitely be one of the, if not the number one wonder of the world if it came to light. This massive underground network. And when I say massive, I'm talking hundreds, even thousands of miles of tunnels. And some of these tunnels are manufactured.
Tim,
yes.
Let me interrupt here, too, because I think it's important that people understand this. In the last pretty much 6 months, there's been secret meetings of the world's leaders. Obama's been there. Kirill, the chief head of the Russian Orthodox Church, has been there. And then you also have the Pope of Rome that we're talking about. You have these guys, but they were involved in, according to our military sources and intel, there's a giant tunnel system that comes from under Antarctica into South America. So when Tim is talking about some of these tunnels in the Xincana going for hundreds of miles, even thousands of miles, it's telling and compelling that as we started out the True Legend series in Peru, all roads lead to Rome, but guess where Hitler ends up at? Hitler ends up in Peru. Now, why that's critical is because Peru has one of the largest underground citadels, in other words, cities, that has been kept hidden from the general population. It's not the only one, but it's the one that Hitler ended up in, having gone from Argentina to Brazil. Now, here's what's cool, and then I'll give it right back to you, Tim. After talking about this on talk radio, I think it was one of the interviews that Tim and I were doing, I got a call from a guy who has a great-grandfather, a photograph of him standing, his grandfather standing in an underground city with Adolf Hitler. And anybody that doesn't know about Hitler, Hitler was absolutely obsessed with underground tunnels and underground cities, underground bunkers. And if you understand the true story of the Third Reich, which I think I pretty well nailed it in Empire Beneath the Ice, my book, you'll see that this tunnel system is a big deal. And the fact that God led Tim to basically start this in Peru, which is called the Navel of the World. And I don't know why Peru played so important. We know all the stuff we know historically, but isn't it fascinating that as we approach the end of the age, not the end of the world, want to make a difference there, the end of the age, that we're ending up right back in Peru. And that when we find all these things out, and the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to remind everybody that Henry Groover was supernaturally translated to an area under Rome. Tim, I wouldn't be surprised if it was under the headquarters you were at. Just supernaturally translated, and in the labyrinth beneath the Roman streets and giant caverns, he confronted two fallen angels. Now, Sheila, did you ever hear that story?
No, I didn't, Steve.
Okay. It's Henry Groover. It's on YouTube and stuff. But here's the deal. People around the world, some of the heaviest prayer ministries in the world that Henry's associated with, actual intercessors, were praying. They are all awakened at their specific time, same time, just different time zone, to pray for Henry. Henry was translated to Rome, taken down kind of a strange staircase, and there he met two fallen angels. The way Henry described them is they had bat wings. Here's what gets important. Extremely tall. I think he says somewhere between 18 and 20 feet. Very, very, if you will, gargoyle-ish style creatures. And they looked over him and they said, "What are you here for?" And Henry said, "The Lord commanded him, in the name of Jesus, I bind you." And from heaven, these are Henry's words, and I don't believe I'm getting anything out of whack. He said the biggest change you could ever imagine that could not even be lifted by human came down and wrapped these guys up, these fallen angels, and then they absolutely screamed and disappeared. So here's the point I'm trying to make. When the Illuminati, the Luciferians, and all these guys meet in the tunnels, there is a supernatural, a preternatural draw to those caverns, if you will, and tunnels to practice their dark sacrifices. So this Chincana that Tim investigated, and we interviewed, I'll let Tim give you that story, but this is the most important DVD, I think, that's out there, available to the public right now. By the way, it's only been available for a couple of weeks. And the idea is that if people get it, they're going to have so many answers, and I think it fulfills the scripture, Sheila, that God said that those who come late in the game get paid the same wage, the parable of the talents of the wages. So what I mean by that is people study this stuff for 20 and 30 years, and it's really warming, Tim. I know it is to you, it is to me, when people say, I could never imagine all this stuff coming together, and now it's like God, here's their statement. It's like God put it together for me in an instant. Do you want to deal with that, Tim? That's a pretty amazing statement.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of feedback like that on this film. And we really we go right at the jugular in this one with the content and with what we're saying. We make some pretty astounding assertions, but we go back and we back them up, like I said, with the fact if we're going to say that the Vatican is covering things up, we're going to go and find you a case and show you that we know what we're talking about and that we have proof that that is true. And we do that in this film, and people are very appreciative of that because we're not just kind of sitting back and shooting things out into the ether. We're putting our hands on the stones. We're visiting the locations, and we're telling you, we're showing you, look, we said there is a cover-up, and here is the proof that what we said is true. And I'm getting a lot of feedback. People are very appreciative of that kind of work.
Sheila, you watched it. What was your... I'd say this, obviously, you see so much of what's going on. It's not flattery, it's the truth. But what were the things that struck you just absolutely wow? What was the wow in this that got you to say, now I get it? Maybe, I mean, not that you didn't see it all along, but what were the highlights that you absolutely were blown away from?
Yeah, well, I had quite a few of those moments throughout watching this DVD. The Vatican knows all the secrets, and yet how they've covered up and really covered over is a better term, astonishing links to the past. These are significant parts of history. They have complete sovereignty. They have immunity with this vast repository of priceless manuscripts and artifacts that would indeed change the course of history. The Jesuits have been seizing artifacts. Insiders have said that for years, usually before they take a trip down a flight of stairs and break their necks, of course. But the other wow was the Catholic Church always building their churches right on top of these ancient temples, hiding these vast networks of tunnels, which you guys chronicle so well, hundreds of miles of subterranean highways, the antediluvian equivalent really to deep underground military bases. And as I looked at some of these giant antediluvian ancient engineering achievements really that would rival anything the Bronze age civilization could ever do, with these geometrically precise angles that would make Newton salivate. And yet we're supposed to buy the official narrative, Steve and Tim, that it's the Inca that constructed them with copper chisels and ropes. I mean, give me a break. I mean, andesite itself is very hard. It's about, 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. So it's hard for me to imagine how you would position these, let alone move them hundreds of miles away over hills. It's glaringly obvious to me that we're looking at technology that far surpasses even the technology that we have today. And the shocker for me was also the legendary crypt that Anselm Rambla actually gained access to beneath the church, and him documenting this underground labyrinth that was said to be the stuff of legends. Just the real fast-paced coalescence of everything you guys tied into this, where we've arrived at the time spoken about by Jesus as it was in the days of Noah. So really a lot of wow moments.
Well, will you just address the whole control, one of the control of the narrative of the ancient aliens? I want people to understand that even now we're seeing aerial phenomenon that's so great, that's so troubling, that's so upsetting to the normal mind. So, because again, Sheila, we got to give people tidbits in an hour or so. But the point is that I'm getting emails, actually even now, where people are saying, "I didn't." Oh, wow! And I'm sorry, the "wow" is a good word, or exceptional. But the alien card. Here's the thing: the great deception that's playing out, that Tom Horn has laid out, has written about, has spoken about, that Chris Putnam, they've gone to Mount Graham, is simply this, ladies and gentlemen, that the denigration of the Lord Jesus Christ, the attack on the kingdom of God, the attack on God's holy word, the attack upon biblical, historical, redemptive Christianity is going to be displaced, courtesy of the Pope of Rome and his cohorts, to lead you to believe that aliens created us, aliens will save us, and there is really no God, it's the aliens. It's the whole Zechariah Sitchin, Anunnaki, Pentagon, the gods of the Sumerians are returning. So that's a mouthful. But when Tim gets to sit down with Zechariah Sitchin's best friend and ask questions. By the way, this man is a very wealthy billionaire, so, I mean, we're not talking about, some guy on the streets of Rome who's got a bottle of wine just rambling. We're talking about somebody that knows. Tim, share that whole thing, because that's really important.
Actually, when we went to Rome, we were on our way to Sardinia, and that's a whole different situation. But for the next episode of our series, we were there for a couple of reasons. But I decided when I was in Rome that I wanted to meet with Vatican insider, and the best one that I know, the best researcher into the Vatican that I know, is Leo Zagami. And it just so happened that he was in Rome while I was there. I met with Leo right in front of the U.S. Embassy, actually. We met in an undisclosed location. Leo was accompanied by a man that he wanted to bring to the meeting. And I didn't know this other guy, and this was the first time that I met Leo. Leo really wanted to bring him to the meeting. He said, "You need to talk to this guy." I thought we were basically just going to be having a conversation about the artifacts that the Vatican has and the bones of giants. But the majority of our conversation revolved around the idea that the Vatican is preparing the world for disclosure and is getting ready to announce, basically is leading the world into a new religion based on alien disclosure, in a nutshell. And the man that he brought was Gian Mario Ferramonti, who is a very famous Italian man who was an entrepreneur and has made lots of money in Italy and is very, very, very well connected. And he happened to be personal friends with Zechariah Sitchin. He was actually the go-between for Zechariah Sitchin and the Vatican. And he would carry between Zechariah Sitchin and Corrado Balducci, who a lot of people remember as the Vatican's official spokesperson for aliens and UFOs. Here, Ferramonti was the go-between, carrying between Zechariah Sitchin and Corrado Balducci in the Vatican. Sitchin lived in New York, and Corrado Balducci worked at the Vatican. And Gian Mario would be carrying between them a mysterious box containing artifacts that he was not allowed to look at. And he would take from the Vatican this box with these artifacts, manuscripts, and who knows what else. and he would bring it to New York and give it to Zechariah Sitchin, and then he would return it back to the Vatican. So there was this collaboration happening between Sitchin and Balducci for many years, dealing with these manuscripts that we're talking about. So we were discussing the idea that the Church of Rome, as I said, is preparing for disclosure and has ancient artifacts, has ancient documents that they're going to use to support a new doctrine, let's say. It's not a new doctrine in the sense that it completely discounts the Bible or other religions. It's much more devious and cunning than that. It's a new doctrine that adds in information from an extraterrestrial source and changes the gospel and changes, actually, the narrative of other faiths to amalgamate them together. And it is the great deception that is coming on the horizon. And so I found myself sitting in Rome talking to these gentlemen. And what's really fascinating is in our film, I think a lot of people will appreciate this and have appreciated it. We break down, let's just call it the doctrine of Sitchin, or the Sitchin doctrine, which is what Steve just mentioned, the Anunnaki and the ancient Sumerians, because a lot of people get hung up on it. Of course, we're all familiar with the Ancient Aliens program and ancient astronaut theory, which posits that in the past, some say that human beings were created by aliens. In Sitchin's interpretation of the Sumerian cylinder seals, it was the Anunnaki that genetically modified a primitive hominid species on Earth to create the human race. And as you know, Sheila, this belief is actually quite prevalent now. And I believe that that is what the Vatican believes, truly, that they truly believe that mankind was actually genetically engineered by aliens.
Yes, well, Zechariah Sitchin, although he was very deceived in his Mesopotamian Syrian text, the Anunnaki Sumerian legends, of course, he asserted the Nephilim were the Anunnaki. But what I want to know is what in the world was Corrado Balducci, the Catholic Church top exorcist, demonologist, why was Balducci with the chief Satanist at the time, Elfram D'Agato?
And that's something we reveal in our film. Actually, Leo Zagami brings that to light in our film, that the not only was Balducci having this contact with Zechariah Sitchin, passing these artifacts back and forth using Ferramonte as the intermediary, he was also closely associated with some very strange characters, Satanists, involved in different kinds of ceremonies and things. So the demonic connection to the whole alien thing, nowhere is it better evident or more evident than at the Vatican, because you have, as you said, the chief demonologist at the Vatican dealing with aliens and at the same time dealing with hardcore Satanists. And there is a very salient connection there. This is the sense that I got. This isn't something that's new to Rome, this idea of ancient aliens and astronaut theory, ancient astronaut theory. I think this is something that was developed a long time ago by the agents of Rome, based on so-called evidence that they have and documents that they have, again, that I believe they're going to produce in the future to support that claim. Steve, I'm sure you probably have something to say along those lines.
Well, sure. I think here's the deal. When Malachi Martin was at his peak right before he was murdered, okay, obviously the man was, in a classic sense, a true genius, but he was also understanding of the satanic influence and presence at the Vatican and under the Vatican. Speaking about the 13th chair, that was always reserved for Lucifer himself. So, I mean, here's the disconnect, Sheila and Tim. People have a hard time getting it. Jesus said over and over that, in the last words on earth, be ye not deceived. Yet now this whole alien embrace, but the tie-in between the chief exorcists and then known Satanists shows you one thing. They're all in it together. Now, isn't it fascinating that everything Jesus did in the light, he always did it in the light, okay? He always worked his miracles. He always fed the multitudes. Everything that he proclaimed his Father's word in the light, because he's the light of the world. Yet you look at all these shady creatures. You look at all these shadow men. You look at, and I want to go back to Henry Groover. what was it at that time? And this was years ago, maybe I think a decade ago when that happened. And I'll get you the link, Sheila, or find it on YouTube. People that want to see what these creatures look like, go to my website. This is critical. Genesis6Giants.com, and go to my illustrations. In there you'll see 2 giant bat-winged fallen angels. When I showed those to Henry said, that's exactly what they look like. The man that gave me the description of those fallen angels in the beginning is the guy that basically was at the sacrifice under the streets of Rome when the former pope had died, and they were sacrificing a little child. Okay, we're talking the world's leaders under the streets of Rome having a child sacrifice to a fallen angel, and fallen angel's presence there, and a giant. It was a giant. They ate the little child. Okay, you say, well, aren't you guys really wild out there? How is it that the Vatican's already announcing that they're going to baptize aliens? How is it that Tom Horn goes to Mount Graham in Arizona, and we have Tom making this statement? These are the who's who of astronomers and astrophysicists casually just brushing the statement away. Oh, yeah, we've got to wait for the UFOs to clear, sometimes for quite a while, to see what we're looking at. The idea that you would title an instrument associated with the largest binocular telescope in the world and call it Lucifer, relating to light, aliens, a disclosure, all of the statements that had been made casually are now coming back to be preeminent and very prominent in the Catholic Church. So to go follow up what Tim is saying, the ties, the surreptitious transfer, if you will, the espionage that was involved in transferring hidden ancient artifacts back and forth. By the way, the Illuminati paid big money for that stuff, okay? And I mean big money. It's what you do, I guess, when you got all the money in the world and can print it all. But they want power. They associate power with artifacts. That's what Adolf Hitler did in his Ahnenerbe, his whole, if you will, SS expeditionary undertakings around the whole world. So what we're saying is, again, not only do all roads lead to Rome, but all roads lead to underground tunnels, because all the underground tunnels lead to the above-surface roads. I'm not trying to play games with words, but again, imagine an ancient underground highway that even traversed continents. Imagine technology so advanced that where we can't lift it with cranes, they could levitate it with harmonic levitation. That's not an occult practice. It's a form of electrogravitic. In other words, you're using electro, but in this case it would be sonogravitic, meaning sounds to basically interfere with the magnetic field of actual mass and be able to lift it, okay? It was said that the giants possess nasal pharyngeal, the composition of their skull, and these are big giants, could basically set up a vibration chamber in their skull, projecting the harmonic waves to offset gravity. It's fascinating. Okay, somebody says, well, that's just all make-believe. Not when you're getting it from multiple four-star generals, not when you're getting it from multiple intelligence operatives, and not when you're getting it from the legends. You see, the basis of this whole series is simply this. Legends and myths are not untrue because they're called legends and myths. Another 1,000 years, they'll call the United States the legendary civilization that voted their own demise, or whatever. But the point is that there's all sorts of evidence, and that's what we're doing, Sheila. We're producing the hard evidence. We're producing the eyewitness testimonies. And by the way, the quality of this DVD, ladies and gentlemen, from all across the spectrums, professional filmmakers, Hollywood people, everything, they're saying, wow, it's that good. So I'd encourage people, you can go to my website, stevequayle.com. People were so excited to get this that I had to put it up, take it down on my website because we were waiting for all the different DVDs to come in from the manufacturers. Now we got plenty to serve everybody. But I think it's important that people get this because I don't know exactly how. I won't give it away. We know where number 3 is going, and obviously we wait to sell out 2 so we can afford to do 3, but we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, about a huge budget. And the huge budget shows in the effects, it shows in all the different imagery, it shows in the equipment used. But why is that important? I believe that there is no room for fuzzy images anymore. So what we're trying to do is present, pun intended, the clearest picture of history that's ever been presented based on the Cyclopean, based on the pre-flood architecture, based on the pre-flood legends. People say, well, I thought everything got wiped out in Noah's flood. Well, everything created by God did, but that which fled the earth by the fallen angels or existed under the earth by the fallen angels, that's a whole other story. Obadiah, which has only got one chapter, verse 4, in the Old Testament, a prophet, though you set your nest amongst the stars, different translations, yet will I bring thee down. The Hebrews thought that every star was the abode of an angel. Well, obviously, God's holy angels are 2/3 of heaven, and yet the third of the angels that rebelled under Lucifer are dispersed throughout the heavens until they're cast down on earth. So we're in for the fight of eternity. We're in for the unfolding of the greatest revelations in history. And again, the words of Jesus are, "Be ye not deceived." So when Tim is dealing and interviewing the Vatican insiders, when the people that are being interviewed, whether it's Malta, Sardinia, Rome, are talking about being silenced, being threatened with death if they talking about all of the strange events where men in giant tents and helicopters taking bones. And we're not just talking about 12-footers. And I want to deal with what's called the square cube law, where they claim, well, you can't have that because of gravity on the earth. You couldn't have giants that big. Giants are not human. They have a supernatural element. Their fathers are fallen angels who possess a different life force that is greater than the human life force. In other words, they can overcome gravity just by the sheer essence of the realm in which they were created from and through. So, Sheila, you'll hear that sometimes. Well, these guys are all crazy. They should know the basics of gravity. Well, you should learn the basics of electrogravitics, critics. There you go. Because they just don't know what they're talking about. I hope you've got my dictionary going on that one.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think what we're seeing here, and I think what you guys have laid so incredibly out here, is really the procession of history going full circle. Rome began in the plains of Shinar. So you've got behind this counterfeit facade of Christianity, very demonic characters have been laboring for millennia to alter our perception of reality, bring us into a pseudo captivity, into this techno sorcery induced spiritual coma, while they usher in a golden age with the embodiment of, well, the poster child for the occult, Nimrod, and his dark directive to really lead a rebellion against God. So that's really what we're seeing here, using whatever concoction of fallen angel, dark occult sorcery, opening dimensional gates, attempting to resurrect the ancient God-men. That whole morphology of terror was wiped out during the flood. So we're really kind of coming back full circle here, aren't we, Tim?
We are, and I want to there's so much stuff in this film. Sometimes we forget to mention some of the stuff that's in the film for people. We have Tom Horn in our film, Leo Zagami, Gian Mario Ferramonti. We're in Peru. We're in Cusco. We're dealing with the walls of Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo. We're in Rome. We go to Malta. Malta's a whole segment. We deal with the hypogeum. We talk about elongated skulls. We deal with so much content in this film. Really what we did is we took two films and made them one. And Steve really felt we needed to make the connection between the ancient stuff, between the megaliths, and the deception that's coming and the aliens and all that. And so that's what we attempted to do in this film. And these could have easily been two separate films. Believe me, yeah. These could have been two standalone films, but we put them together because we want people to get it. We want people to make the connection, exactly what you just said. History is going full circle back to the beginning, as in the days of Noah. Those dynamics, those realities are already beginning to resurge and to resurface in the earth. And we're blowing the trumpet because so many people are already getting swept up in the lies that are coming out of Rome. It's already happening. And it couldn't be better timed. And Tom Horn is in our film. We talk about Mount Graham. We show some footage that people probably have never seen from Tom concerning Mount Graham. We talk about dimensional gates and all kinds of stuff. By the time we get to the end of this film, and our film begins, as you said, Sheila, it opens up right out of the gates with the testimony of the AC-130 pilot who transported the body of a recently killed giant. And we're talking a 12-foot giant that weighed 1,000 pounds. And this story has since been corroborated by a couple of other military sources through other people. So this thing is fast-paced, packed with content, and our hope is that we have connected the dots for people so they can look into the past, understand the reality of the pre-flood world, and then look into the future, projecting into the future the deception that is already unfolding that has to do directly with the dynamics that were in play in the pre-flood world.
Well, Tim, when you say you connected the dots, let me tell you, you've connected the dots. Incredible cornucopia of information here that you're just not going to find anywhere else. And I really thought that I was watching a high-definition professional History Channel documentary. It was really that well done. Steve, final thoughts?
Well, I will stick with my statement. The greatest cover-up in history is the cover-up and now the cover-over of history. Remember, when Jesus said men's hearts are going to fail them for fear for looking after those things coming up, U-P-O-N, the earth, most people just think, oh, that's a normal events happening on the earth. No, up on the earth is different than even the signs in the heavens, sun, moon, and stars. Very specific language, but you know, Sheila, like I've said so many times, the events of God's Word are linked to the timing of His majesty and the time that He set, the specific times that God Himself has set for these events to unfold. And I want to just deal with one more time the situation with Hitler. What you're watching, ladies and gentlemen, taking place in the world in Turkey right now is critical. Turkey is where Satan's seat at Pergamos is. That's what Jesus said. Now you've got the man claiming to be the leader of all Muslims in the world surrounding a nuclear Air Force base with some people, my sources are saying 200 plus nuclear weapons, including H-bombs. You've got the Secretary of Defense refusing to remove those nuclear weapons. Our military men have been there without power, without water. And let me share this. If you've got Satan on his throne and now someone assuming that throne in earthly form, you've got 200 nuclear weapons that could fall into his hands. He could just take them, by the way, Sheila. And, you know, with the government we have now, they just say, oh, well, just balance of power. That would put Erdogan of Turkey into the status of being, in my estimation, minimal fourth largest nuclear power in the world. Instantly. Okay, so if you've got Muslims, Islamic co-conspirators in the United States in the largest functions of government, more powerful than anything most people can imagine, and they allow that to happen because they share in the, if you will, Islamic world's overview of prophetic history that the Imam Mahdi is on his way, but the only way he can come is through a global nuclear conflagration. Does it seem really too far out? Why does anybody have to develop those nuclear weapons when they can just go in and steal the U.S. ones? That is the ultimate nightmare. That is the ultimate nightmare. But it is also, remember this, if you've got a man who, when you take his name in anagrams, means dragon, okay, Erdogan, or dragon, and for the record, King Arthur's name was Arthur Pendragon, son of the dragon, you've got the overwhelming presence of slaughter in the midst. In other words, we're seeing all these things happening in the book of Revelation. In other words, if you want to put the geographical location of the seven churches which Jesus addressed, they're all pretty much in the area of what we call Turkey now. I think it's fascinating that the living God would give us such a magnificent Technicolor 3D, 4D, 5D, seven-dimensional picture of the headlines, of the news, of the events, of the history of the day, of the history of the past. Pull it all together, and people still scratch their their heads and, want to sing Kumbaya or, want to dance naked in the streets as they're doing around the world, and they don't know how close we are to such a momentous series of biblical end-time events that will change not only their lives forever, but the face of the earth forever. And all roads do lead to Rome, but guess what? Rome knew in order to find out their destiny, they had to go to the underground roads that originated in Peru. And that's where Tim, the True Legends film team, that's where we started this whole thing. It's fascinating that now we're seeing the underground highway. We're seeing, and so people have got to understand. I would say this: if you do not get this DVD, you're going to miss it. And missing it means more than you can imagine. I'm saying like miss eternity. It's that critical. It's that important. And I think when you see this, ladies and gentlemen, you will see what an amazing job of writing that Tim Alberino did, but you'll also see the hand, the fingerprint, the palm print, and the love that of God trying to say, don't perish for lack of knowledge. We know the scripture says this: God's people perish for lack of knowledge, not because they're not given it, but because they refuse it. So I think that's a critical issue. That's my bottom line. They go on stevequayle.com. It's on my front page to order, or they can go on our website, truelegendstheseries.com. It's there. But get them, because, again, I'm telling you, people are responding. I've never seen a response like this. This isn't, marketing. This is reality. It's hitting the nerve, and as all glory goes to God, it was his time for this project to be released in conjunction with what Tom Horn and Chris Putnam have done. I think God's given a secondary witness that is just mind-blowing.
Well, and at the same time, I guess people are too busy chasing after Pokemon Go to tie the dots, Steve. But again, True Legends, this is episode 2. The Unholy See. The DVD is amazing. You have to get it. And it's also available in DVD rental, unlimited streaming on Vimeo, which is wonderful, at truelegendstheseries.com. And just moment to wrap up, Tim, final thoughts.
Well, it's available in DVD. It's also available in Blu-ray for those who want to watch it in Blu-ray version. And the unlimited online streaming through Vimeo is a great option for people, especially people who are overseas. If you purchase the film on Vimeo, you can watch it an unlimited amount of times for as long as the film is on Vimeo, which is going to be a very long time. And I encourage people to get it on Vimeo if they want to show friends and family that maybe aren't interested or wouldn't buy the film themselves. When their family's over, they can pull it up on Vimeo on their TV, on their Roku, and play the movie. I mean, the timing of this film is so critical. It's so important because we're not talking about a deception that's coming 20 years in the future. We are talking about a deception that's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's happening this month. It's happening this year. The Pope of Rome is beginning to beguile Protestant believers, and the ultimate revelation is coming, and people are going to be swept away because that's how potent the deception is going to be. This is a weapon. This is a shield, this documentary, to arm yourself with knowledge, to understand the lie that's coming before it's hatched on the world, before it is unleashed on the world, and to have a historical context and perspective to avoid being swept away with the tsunami that's coming.
Well said, Tim. Well, I want to thank you both for your time in coming on the program today and for putting together this incredible series. I highly recommend it. People, get this. You can go to truelegendstheseries.com. Steve and Tim, thank you for all your hard work in unraveling the absolute astonishing cover-up of history and how it ties into the events that we are seeing now unfolding before us. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila.
Folks, that was Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com and Timothy Alberino from the Alberino Analysis. Bookmark truelegendstheseries.com. Get the Unholy See. I'm going to tell you, this is a must-have. Tomorrow on the program, I have an incredible guest, John S. Terrell. He's going to lay out the Kabbalah like you've never heard. Could the occult have started with King Solomon? Well, find out that and so much more. You're not going to want to miss that. That's tomorrow. And then Monday, I'm joined by Peter Torres. That, too, is going to be a great show. Don't forget, download the Weekend Vigilante app for smart devices And don't forget to sign up for my YouTube channel. My social media icons are there at the top right of weekendvigilante.com. Thank you for tuning into the broadcast today. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night and God bless.